And I'm talking to Richard Paul, who was a B-24 pilot in World War II. And how about starting right at the beginning? How did you get in? Why did you get in?
Well, I'll tell you. You can sit there or here or wherever you want to. Move it wherever you want to.
Alrighty.
I was 3A in the draft. Had my mother's a dependent. My father had died. I was working down a brown drug, just a flunky, working on the floor. I started at $10 a week. I got up to $17.50, and same day, a friend of mine and I got our 1A draft notices to report for draft. We didn't want to do that, so we got in his car and drove to Peoria and enlisted in the Army Air Force. We asked for pilot training. We got there about noon. We took a examination that afternoon, and they had 150 questions, all multiple choice. And you had to pass to 84 to get in. I had 135 correct.
Wow.
My friend who also passed the exam, they had to come back the next morning. So we went back the next morning. We went to the Pierre Marquette Hotel for the night in Peoria. Next morning we went back, won a physical exam. They took us in there and they said, give them a basket, put everything in that basket except your shoes. Keep those on. So we paraded. And we both passed the physical exam. They told us, well, you're going back home, I'll let you know when we want you to tune in. So we came back home.
Now, what year was this, sir? What?
1942.
Okay.
We came on back home and said, we'll let you know when we want you to report. So we came back home, that was in November. In October I had been 26. If you were over 26 and a half, you couldn't get in. So I got under the wire. We both got notices on January the 30th to report on the 31st to Decatur, Illinois. No public transportation across there. So his stepfather drove us over there. My girlfriend went along and Judy's wife went along. We got over there, we didn't know where we were going. They signed us in and put us on a troop train and took us to, when we got where we were going, we found out we were in Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis. We stayed there 2 months. So many guys had a cold down there. It was the 1st of February. And so many guys had a cold that we named the place Pneumonia Gulch. And we stayed there for 2 months. Then they said, well, we're going to take your temperatures, and if you can leave here, if you don't have a temperature, you can go. If you're under 100. Well, I was 99, so I got to go. My friend got to go too. He went someplace in Missouri to a college training detachment. I went to Galesburg, Illinois, is where I found out I was at Knox College. I was there for 2 months, doing a lot of studying. And at the end of 2 months, we got a little flying in. We got 10 hours in a Piper Cub. Nobody's going to get any solo time. It's all dual. Well, we got a start on flying there. And then we shipped out. We went to San Antonio. We stayed in the Aviation Cadet Center. I was there for 5 months. 3 months I was waiting to get into pre-flight school. Then for 2 months I was across the aisle, across the road to the pre-flight school. It was kind of interesting. They took us in math from 1 and 1 is 2 to calculus in 2 months. And we had another thing, we had to learn the air flight rules and everything. And then they put us on a bus and took us to Corsicana, Texas. And for primary flight training. On the way up there, the bus had a flat tire. The guy stopped to change the tire, and while he was doing that, we left the bus and we walked up the road about half a block where there was a store. He ran out of candy real quick. Then we got to pre-flight school. And we spent 2 months there flying PT-19s.
Now, what is that exactly? Is that...
It's a Ranger, 175 horsepower. Ranger, 2-seat. Well, we flew with an instructor. My instructor's name was Thomas Saffold. I don't know why I remember that, I do. Anyway, he took me through the ropes there. And we spent 2 months there, and we were about 50 miles south of Dallas, Texas. On the weekends we were off. So we take off and hitchhike to Dallas, Texas. I found a swimming pool out in Breckenridge Park, went swimming. And they had an aviation cadet center there that we could go relax in a hotel. And some of the guys would rent a boat and go on the river there. The Brazos River ran through there. They always managed to turn the canoe over. And then we were there for 2 months of pre-flight training, then we shipped out from there. We went to Independence, Kansas for basic flight training, higher powered aircraft, BT-13, 14, and 15. They told us on that 14, if you drag a wingtip, you're washed out. I didn't have any luck flying a 14. They put me in 13 to 15. I did fine. I was there 2 months, and shortly before Christmas I had to go pop two and talk to the CO, asking for permission to get married. Oh. Well, my girlfriend came out. He gave me permission. I said, another request, sir. A pass to go to town to buy a marriage license. He gave me that. I went to town, bought a marriage license. Christmas Eve of '43, my girlfriend was out there. She was staying in a hotel. I had all set up with the pastor, the chaplain, and he came to town and drove us out to the chapel, married us, and I had to go get a couple of guys for witnesses. They drove us back to town. I lost my independence in Independence, Kansas. And we were there for about a week. Then we shipped out. My wife got a bus ride. We took a bus. She had enough money to pay their way. We went to Ellington Field, south of Houston, Texas. We were there for 2 months. That was advanced flight training. Flying AT-20s, twin-engine aircraft. Well, after 2 months, we graduated. In the meantime, I had to buy uniforms. There's a cadet there whose father was selling uniforms, so we bought them all from him. And he wanted to be paid. I didn't have any money. But I managed to scrape up enough to pay for the uniforms. I think they were $60. And then I was a second lieutenant. And I had 12 days leave of duty. And I came back to Quincy. My wife and I came back here. We were married then. We stayed at my mother's house out on Locust Street. And then it was time to go for, let's see. Oh, then we had to go to Liberal, Kansas. We went to The CBQ depot was downtown, and second at Oak. Got on a train, went to Kansas City, and they didn't have any reserved seat chair cars on the train going from across Kansas to Liberal, Kansas. So we there was one seat in one car. We shared it. Sometimes she sat on my lap. We spent the whole day going across Liberal, Kansas to Liberal. We got there and they said, we went to the hotel and they said, there aren't any rooms. But there's a lady here that has a spare room. They called her up and she said we could come and stay there for 3 nights. So we went there and we stayed there for 3 nights. All the time we were looking for a place to stay. And she finally said, you're doing better than the other enlisted officers I've had here. I'm going to let you stay here for $10 a week. We had a sleeping room. And sometimes we ate out the base. Sometimes we ate uptown. But the rest of the rooms that she had to rent were filled with enlisted personnel. The bathroom was on the 2nd floor and I was on the 1st. The bathroom was always full. If I had to have a bathroom, I had to walk over to the hotel and find a public place. But we were there 2 months. I learned to fly a B-24. Then
were you happy or to fly a B-24, or were you looking forward to some other, like a fighter plane or a B-17 or?
I didn't know. I didn't care, as long as I got to fly a bomber. Anyway, they sent me to Liberal, Kansas. We had a 10-day land route. No, we went to Liberal, Kansas. That's where we went to on the train. And then we stayed there for 2 months. And I learned to fly the B-24. Then they flew me out to Fresno, California. And my wife got a ride out there with some other people, other wives that were flying out there. And my brother lived in Fresno, so she stayed with him there. And I got out there, had some time off, and I went down to where he was working and walked in on him. He didn't know I was within 1,000 miles of there. That was kind of interesting. And my wife stayed with him while we were in Fresno. Then I was transferred down to the airport near Riverside, California, March Air Force Base. And let's see, they took me down there on a troop train. She had to get on a bus and find her way down there. She did that. She found a place that we could live off base. A sleeping room with kitchen privileges. And we were there for 2 months, learning to fly the flying formation and combat flying. And we flew a lot of missions out to sea and back. And I only stayed in my room out at the base when I had to fly at 4 o'clock in the morning. She was quite ambitious. She went out and found herself a job in one of the stores to have a little extra money. I got paid $150 a month, $75 flight pay. And since I was married, we each got $21 a month subsistence allowance. And that's at March Air Force Base. And then they took me from there, flew me up to Hamilton Field, north of San Francisco. And she went up and stayed with my brother's in-laws near San Francisco. And I'd get off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd hitchhike a ride into San Francisco across the Golden Gate Bridge. Then I'd get on a cable car to go down to where the bridge went across the the bay, and take that off and go down to Pablo Boulevard, San Pablo Boulevard, to where my wife was staying. I only had 6 hours off. It'd take me 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back. Didn't spend much time. Then they gave me an airplane and assigned me a crew of 10. And they were loading that airplane up. We were going to go over to Fairfield Susan Air Base. They took me over there, and she went out to see her. I was going to be going overseas. And I got out there and they said she kept making phone calls, so I called her at night. I said, any night I don't call, I'm gone. They had my crew and my airplane, and September the 1st, 1944.
Now, was it a new airplane or?
It was a new airplane.
Mm-hmm.
But when they were putting our stuff in it, some guy backed the truck into it and punched a hole, and they had to patch the hole first. I had to sign on the dotted line for the airplane. He said, if you don't get it, where you're supposed to go is Townsville, Australia. If you don't get it there, you have to pay $2,500 for it. So I called her up. I said, any night I don't call, I'm gone. So she came, she went out to see her sister, lived near there in California. Then I had her a TR to come back to Quincy. And she came back to Quincy, and then she didn't want to stay at my mother's, so she went back to her parents up in Saskatchewan where they were living. She stayed up there while I was overseas. Yeah, and on September the 1st, 1944, I took off from Fairfield Susan Air Base. I went over the Golden Gate Bridge at 3,000 feet, went out to sea. I went around another B-24. He got scared and turned around and went back. I was going faster than he was. I forgot to pull it back in a auto lean. And pretty soon, about an hour or so out, my navigator called me up. Paul, we're 10 degrees off the course. Give me a new course. He gave me a new course, and I was careful that way. 13 hours later, we landed in Honolulu. We stayed in Honolulu. Well, they wanted to check the engine, so we had a day off there. I got a chance to go to Waikiki and go swimming, tour the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, and finally, if I wanted something to do, I went to a movie. Then the next day, we took off from there, and we went down to Canton, down toward Christmas Island, and flew a dogleg route over to Canton Island. It was just like a sand spit out there in the middle of nowhere, with just enough land on it to have an air base. I was shutting the engines down after I landed it, and one of the guys standing out by the wing was waving his arms. I motioned him to come on board while I was shutting the engines down. He come in, climbed up in the cockpit. It was Ernie Hageman from 5th and Chestnut, from the Hydrator Hageman drugstore. He told me there were 4 guys from Quincy on that island. I knew 2 of them. We got my engineer grounded for a day and laid over for a day. And the other guy I knew was a sergeant in the Army. He had access to a boat. We went deep sea fishing. The next day we took off, flew for about 6 hours, went up to Tarawa that we'd run the Japanese out of. Stopped there overnight. Next day we took off, went to Guadalcanal. Then from Guadalcanal, I never saw so many mosquitoes in my life. But I did have a mosquito netting to sleep under. The next day we took off from there and we landed in Townsville, Australia. And we were there for about a week. And I went into town one day and I thought, well, things are a little bit crude here. I looked around and I saw a little shed along the sidewalk. I went over to see what it was. It was a men's urinal. They had a pot, had a trough in there for you to urinate into. It ran down into the ground. Then I went into town. I found a store had some fresh strawberries, so I bought them and ate them. walked around the town, ate the fresh strawberries. Then we took off from there, we headed for New Guinea. We were supposed to go to Nadzab in the middle of the Markham Valley. We got over there and I called up Port Moresby. I called them up and asked them what the weather is in the Markham Valley. They said Savannah 4. I didn't know what that meant. Pretty soon they called back and said, you better land here. So I landed at Port Moresby. I never saw such a long runway, steel mat, all the way. They were expecting B-29s to come in there. So we stayed there overnight. That's the first place I saw any Women's Army Air Corps. And they were marching around. They had MMPs in front of them and MMPs behind them. They were keeping them for themselves. Then the next day we took off and went over, and some guy came along. He said, I can take you over there. I came from there. I said, okay. So he sat in the pilot's seat. I let him do it. He took us over the Nadzab in the Markham Valley. And we stayed there. And we flew 3 missions out of there. I told my co-pilot to take our Form 5s up so they could put the remarks into them. He refused to do it, so I got him off my crew. I had to take him back to get out of there. His name was Lloyd Duckworth. He's a red-headed flannel mouth from New Jersey. And anyway, we went from there. They flew us up the island of Doomfor.
Where is that?
Off the north coast of New Guinea, toward the west end.
Okay.
We were in Dutch country then. We had to change our monetary from the Australian pounds and pence to guilders. And we did that. A guilder was worth 51 cents. And we stayed there, flew some missions from there. Then we flew our missions. We had through our first missions. We went to a small island just for practice bombing. And then after that, we started flying over the Philippines. We flew 36 bombing missions over Borneo and the Philippines. I had one of them, and they got me a Distinguished Flying Cross. We were out on the west coast of Borneo, looking for some shipping. We saw a ship camouflaged by the city of Jesselton, about south of it. Went out to sea and came in on the deck. We strafed it. We set it on fire with hauling gasoline. Made a big fire. The bomb missed it, but the tracer set it on fire. Then we went up over the mountain that was ahead of us. I made the bombardier miss. I had to pull up to go over the mountain. And he missed the bomb, but the tracer set it on fire, so it was all right. And then we went around over the mountain and around over the town of Jesselton and back out to sea, and it was burning pretty good. Then we went up and there was a big inlet in the North Borneo. We found 2 more ships up there, a larger one and another small one like that one. And we managed to sink them both. And that, we sent a message back to the outfit that was on Morotai by then. Said we sunk a foxtail dog and 2 sugar charlies. ETA is 5 o'clock. We got back and before we left there, I was given a Distinguished Flying Cross for sinking 3 ships. Then we flew the rest of our missions all over the Philippines. One time was kind of interesting. We had met in formation by the island, the north shore of the island of Mindanao, and flew north into to bomb the airport at Manila. And we got up there, we bombed the airport, and on the way back the engineer came to me and he said, "Lieutenant, we got a little problem. We're running low on fuel." Well, the island of Leyte was there with Tacloban. There was an air base there. That's where MacArthur made his first landing. We got back to Tacloban. I landed there and said, "What'd you come in for?" I said, "Gasoline. Give me a drink and I'll be gone." Well, we took off to get back to Boracay. We didn't get there at 11 o'clock at night. And on the way back, we ran into the damnedest thunderstorm out over the ocean. We hit an updraft. We were flying at 8,000 feet. All of a sudden, we were at 11,000. I called the guys up, told them to put on oxygen. They did. And the navigator said we're on course. After we got there, out of the thunderstorm, we were on course. We headed for the island. We got back there at 11:30 at night instead of 6 o'clock, which would have been normal. We flew the rest of our missions there. Then they said to me, you don't have to do this because you're just waiting to go home. I was waiting to get the yellow from the atabrine out of my skin, sitting out in the sun. And he said, would you take an airplane down to BIAC and bring back some engineering supplies? I said, yes, I'll do it. So I had a pilot, a co-pilot, and an engineer. We got down there, the guy who went along was getting his engineering things in. We were there a day or two, and they tried to put my engineer on working in the, what the heck is it? Oh, on KP duty. He came to me, he said, what'll I do? I said, get lost. He got lost. They never did find him for KP duty. Then when it was time to get the stuff loaded, we came back to BIAC, and then we came back to Morotai. And then I caught a ride. A guy was going to take me down to catch an airplane to go up to Leyte. I was on the way home. And I got up to Leyte, and they put me on a 646 and took me to a different airport. And the sergeant assigned me a place to sleep. And I took my stuff and went in there. 5 minutes later it was, now here it is. He called me back. Get your stuff, you're going on that C-54 to San Francisco. So I flew over and I flew back. I flew on that C-54 till I got to Honolulu. But on the way, we stopped at Guam. There was a guy there with a B-29. We'd never seen one. So we went and asked him if we could look at his airplane. He said it's classified. I said, so's a 24 I've been flying in combat. Oh, go on, you can see anything you want. So we looked at it and crawled all through it. And then the next day we took off, island hopped till we got to Johnson Island, one of the Hawaiian islands way out there. That's where I heard Roosevelt died. And the next day we went on into Honolulu. Then they kicked me off the airplane, and I had to get a ride, and I rode in a LB-30, it's a B-24 with passenger seats in it. Rode on that to San Francisco. I got to San Francisco, I called I sent a telegram to my wife up in Saskatchewan. On the west coast, headed east. Be in Quincy Friday or Saturday. Well, I got on a troop train. I drove across the Great Salt Lake, got to going across Burlington, Iowa, recognized the Mississippi River, went up to Fort Sheridan. Got my leave orders. Went back to the Chicago depot. I figured my life would be running on that train that came from St. Paul to St. Louis. They called it the Zipper. So I went to the depot to buy a ticket. I wanted to go to Burlington, Iowa and get on that train. I figured maybe she'd be on there. So the guy said, I can only sell you a ticket straight to Quincy. I said, okay. He sold me the ticket. I got on the train I wanted to get on. The guy didn't say a thing about it. I got off at Burlington, waited till that other Zipper came by, I got on it. I walked every car to that train and she wasn't on it. I got off at Quincy at 4 o'clock in the morning. I got a taxi to take me to 18th and Locust. Went to my mother's house. She wasn't there. She was out traveling with some guy. But the guy neighbor next door I knew, I woke him up. He had the key to the house. He gave it to me. I went in and spent the night there. The next morning I was down at the depot at 4 o'clock. When our zipper came in, my wife came in. And we had a 30-day delay at home. And the guy let my mother know I was back, so she came running home. We went and stayed with her for 30 days. Then we caught a train down to Florida for reassignment down Miami Beach. Stayed in the Whitman Hotel down there. And we had a very pleasant stay there for a week. I had to go to the dentist and he put a filling in for me. But after a week there, we went swimming, we played on the beach, we threw horseshoes. We went with some friends to one place or another. And then we caught the train up to northern Florida to head for Memphis. I was reassigned to the Army Air Corps. He went to flight school. It was a school that flew different airplanes around the country. I got out there and my wife and I got out there and stopped at uptown in Florida. A bunch of ladies came on. We out there and had food for the servicemen. So I went out and got some food. I got an extra sandwich, took it back for my wife. We got to Memphis, Tennessee. We stayed in a hotel all night, and then I reported. And since I was married, I could live off base. So I was living off base. And I was going to ground school for different airplanes. I went to one day for a PT-13. It was a single engine airplane. The next day I got orders to go down and down into I kind of forget the name of the town. It was down the next state south. And get an airplane and fly it out to Sacramento, California. It was an airplane, it was a Cobra Cadet, but it was flown also from a remote control. The Navy was used them to try to shoot them down. Well, I told my wife I gotta go to there. And they flew me out there. So she went to, got a driver's license for the car, had some fellow help her. And she went to ration board and got 2 new tires for the car we'd bought. We bought the used cars in Memphis till we found a car. And then instead of going to her sisters in Rochester, she got gasoline enough to go there. She came to Lubbock, Texas, where I was. We stayed in a motel out there for $3 a night. They're not that cheap anymore.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, I was out there going through instrument flight school. And when I got through with that, I took the test. They said I passed. I couldn't have a green card, I could have a white instrument card. So I came back and they said, you're getting out. You said you wanted out, so you're getting out. You could leave now. I was on my own. We got in the car, we drove back to Memphis. They said, you can't go on the air base. I said, maybe I better give you a parachute. So let me on long enough to get rid of that. We stayed in the motel all night. We started for Quincy. I got to Quincy, and on the way north, I visited some friends in St. Louis. We had our own car then, so we could get along all right. It was an Oldsmobile Club Coupe. We drove it up here, and I had to go to Fort Sheridan to get my discharge. So I went up there and they said, come back Monday morning. This was Friday. Well, I took her over to Rochester and left her with her sisters. I came back. Then when I got discharged on Monday morning.
And what was the date that you got discharged? Do you remember?
Don't remember.
Was it 1945?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in 45, in March of 45.
Okay.
The 3rd of March of 45.
So the war wasn't quite over yet.
Yeah. Some of it was still going. But they were done in Europe, so they, and they're about done in Japan, so they turned me loose. So I went back over and picked her up and went up to Minneapolis, the Northwest Airlines, to try to get a job flying. They said, not unless you got a green card. Well, I didn't have one. So I went back to the drugstore, told Ed Brown I'd like to come back and go to work at the pharmacy and see if I could get a pharmacy license. I got my pharmacy license in a year. I wasn't a pharmacist, I was an assistant. And 5 years later I went up and took the state board with the college graduates and passed that, then I was a registered pharmacist. I worked there until 1983. So I worked there for 44 years. During the Korean War, I got a letter, I got a promotion to captain, because I was still in reserve. I got a letter offering me to go to B-29 transition and go to combat. I had a wife and 3 daughters. I didn't volunteer. I stayed home. I forgot about going. I was flying some airplanes around here, but that was about all.
I got a couple of questions about the B-24. It was a big airplane and it held more bombs than any well, except for the B-29.
And 12 100-pound bombs.
Yeah. And
the B-29 held 84 of them.
But it had like a high wing loading, right? And so it was a little more difficult to fly than
No, there's the difficult to fly right there, that C-46.
Oh, really?
Didn't have any dehydrated to the wings. They didn't go up any. They just went out.
Oh.
B-24 flew nice. I got so I can handle it pretty easy.
Now the DC-3, it had dihedral in the wings, right?
That's not a DC-3.
No, I know, but I'm just asking if the DC-3, they corrected that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a later built airplane than the DC-3, and they made a mistake in it.
Mm-hmm.
My fellow that I joined with wound up flying these over in India, over the Himalayas. And he got by with it. He said he went down to Biak one time, hauling some shotgun shells down there for the guys to shoot skeet. We shot some skeet when we were over there.
Huh. Very interesting.
So when I retired from Brown Drug, my wife and I had a new car. And we ran the country. We went to Alaska 3 times. We've been in every state in the Union except New England. I'd be going to 13th Air Force reunions. Any place from Gettysburg to San Diego. Well, the one in San Diego I didn't go to, but I went to a lot of the other ones. And usually I'd meet the guy who'd been bombardier on Maricruz. I'd meet him there. But I met him in Tucson one time when we had a reunion there. He was having a heart problem. He had to fly down. He flew back. Then I got word that he died. He had one boy. And I was stopped to visit his wife one time. I sent her a Christmas card one year. I got a reply from their son. Mom went up to Seattle to a high school class reunion, and she died up there. She's with him now. He became a guide on some trails and working for the Department of Natural Resources there in Nevada. And she had him cremated and he was scattered along one of the trails. I got a reply from her son. Mom died up there, she's joined him now. so she scattered her up there too. Well, we did pretty well. We came back here, we were always going someplace, and people would leave their kids with a babysitter and go take the trips. We didn't do that. We took our kids along. I had them all over the country. One daughter I had to Alaska 3 times.
When you were flying missions to the Philippines, did you have any missions where you had trouble getting back, engines quit or shot up or anything?
Well, you see that ship up there?
Yeah.
That's a Japanese ship. Hondo class battleship. Went over that on one of my first missions. They ruptured my fuel cell. Number 2, fuel cell. It didn't catch on fire, fortunately. It was just gasoline running out. I got the co-pilot to fly. I went in the back and looked and see the gasoline running out of number 2 with the jet stream. And I went down to the front, found the bombardier down there to smoke a cigarette. I got that turned out real quick. I flew that airplane back to the island of Morotai. We didn't have a base up there yet then. I landed it there. We went to an outfit and spent the night with them. And I couldn't fly it. It was still dripping gasoline the next morning. And I went down to the flight room. There was a guy there with flying a C-47. He said, I'm going back to BIAC empty. I said, would you take my crew on board to shoot a landing on Noon 4 and let us out? He said, yes, I'll do that, so we got a ride back. I left the airplane there on Morotai. The next night, the Japanese bombed it. It was shot. That's the only time I got hit. Another time, we were bombing low level, dropping fragmentation bombs up over Cebu Island in the Philippines. Japanese had troops there. We were trying to wipe them out. And one of the bombs blew up under the airplane. Put 37 holes in the airplane. Didn't hit anything, but one of the guy on the top turret hit him in the leg. We got back to the island of Morotai. I told him, we have wounded personnel on board. They took Popovics in and took him to the hospital. The ambulance met the airplane. They took him to the hospital. We went to see him the next day. The guy started giving him some blood. He didn't really need it. They missed a blood vessel. His arm was all swollen up with that blood. We had it along with us every mission in case they needed it. They didn't happen to do it right. That's the only time I had any problem.
So the B-24 was a pretty reliable airplane.
Yeah, it was.
Did it have a different engine in it than the B-17?
Yeah. B-17 had a Wright Cyclone. B-24 had a Pratt & Whitney.
Oh.
250, 5,000 total. Held 2,700 pounds of gas, 2,700 gallons of gasoline.
And how long would it fly on that?
18 hours. If we had any longer missions than that, we'd leave out 3 of the bombs and put a 600-gallon tank in the bomb bay. One time we were going on a long mission and we had an extra tank in. The engineer came to me, he says, I can't get that gasoline to transfer to the main tanks. I said, well, Leroy, do what you can. I kept on going. And he came back in about an hour. He said, I had a wrench. I took that pump apart and put it back together, and I got the gas transferred. That's the only transfer we ever had. You must have a big card in there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's good for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time with me.
Well, I'm glad to do it. It's 10:10. I don't leave here till 11:15.
Okay, I'd like to take my camera and look at some of your medals, and maybe you could explain some of the pictures up there.
Well, those pictures up there are when my wife and I were on a trip,
Oh, okay.
the Arctic Circle. We were up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and we'd seen the pipeline that runs down. They were advertising a trip to Fort Yukon, north of the Arctic Circles. There was an Indian sitting there, drunk and asleep. She said, I only got 3 seats on that airplane, there were 4 of us. So my wife said to her, why don't you let him sit there and sleep, and you let us have his seat, and you'll sell all 4 seats. So she did. And we went up to Fort Yukon.
Now,
The one on the left is the Distinguished Flying Cross.
the one on the left on the bottom?
Yeah. The other 2 are my dog tags, enlisted and
Uh-huh.
officer.
Okay, is that one of your reunions there?
That's one of the reunions over in Dayton, Ohio. We had 119 people there.
Wow. What year was it?
2 of my daughters and I are at the end. My wife had died.
That's just a drawing of a B-24?
Yeah. Doesn't have the number on it, or I can tell you when it was made.
Now that ship is the one that poked some holes in your airplane, right?
Poked a hole by number 2 gasoline tank.
Now is that, the middle picture there, is that your airplane and your crew?
That isn't our airplane, that's the crew though. And the other one, black and white, is the crew that was taken on the island of Mordecai.
Okay. Can I ask you how old you are?
97.
That's just fantastic.
I'm waiting for October when I'll be 98. My wife died in 2008.
Oh, wait.
She was here, they had a respirator on her, helping her breathe. I knew she was gone. So I told them to take it off. My son-in-law was standing there, he said, that's the smartest thing you ever did. We let her go.
Yeah.
I buried her out of Soldiers Home. She wanted me to have her cremated, take her ashes back up where she lived on the farm in Saskatchewan, and spread them in the spruce grove. I didn't do that, the property had changed hands. Besides, you needed a passport then to go to Canada, and I didn't have one.
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
I gave up my passport.
Well, you didn't need one in World War II, right?
No. Is that shut off now?
No, but I will. Or do you have something else?
No.
Okay.